Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Linkoff Bible Church in New Jersey. Every weekday I read one chapter of the New Testament and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's reading is from the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. But because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to the wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does, and likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another, except for an agreement of time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because you lack self-control. But this I say by way of concession, not of command. I wish that all men were even as myself am. However, each man has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows that it is good for them to remain even as they are. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. But to the married I give instructions, not I, but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband. But if she does leave, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and the husband should not divorce his wife. But to the rest I say, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband, and he consents to live with her, she must not send her husband away. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified through her believing husband. For otherwise your children are unclean, but now they are holy. Yet, if the unbelieving one leaves, let him leave. The brother or sister is not under bondage in any cases, but that God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each, in this manner let him walk. And so I direct in all the churches. Was any man called when he was already circumcised? He is not to become uncircumcised. Has anyone been called in uncircumcision? He is not to be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But what matters is keeping the commandments of God. Each man must remain in that condition in which he was called. Were you called while a slave? Do not worry about it. But if you are able also to become free, rather do that. For he who was called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who was called while free is Christ's slave. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brethren, each one of you is to remain with God in that condition in which he was called. Now, concerning virgins, I have no command of the Lord, but I give my opinion as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. I think, then, this is good in view of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be released. Are you released from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you marry, you have not sinned. If a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Yet, such will have trouble in this life, and I am trying to spare you. But this I say, brethren, that the time has been shortened, so that from now on those who have wives should be as though they had none, and those who weep as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, and those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use the world as though they did not make full use of it, for the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord, but one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how he may please his wife, and his interests are divided. The woman who is unmarried and the virgin is concerned about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy in body and spirit, but the one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. This I say for your own benefit, not to put a restraint upon you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. If any man thinks he is acting unbecomingly toward his virgin daughter, she is past her youth, and if it must be so, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. So then, both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives, but if her husband is dead, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my opinion, she is happier if she remains as she is, and I think that I also have the Spirit of God. One thought. The book of 1 Corinthians was written, in part, to answer questions that the Corinthians had. We see that very evident in verse 1 here. Paul says, now concerning about the things that you wrote. So Paul is answering questions that they had. And essentially, one of the questions that they were wrestling with is, what is better, singleness or marriage? So the Corinthians were debating this, and one of the things that was happening is that they were believing, well, if I am single, then I can devote more time to God and doing His will. And Paul certainly acknowledges that singleness is good. In verse 1, he says it's good for a man not to touch a woman. He's not saying like you can't give a woman a pat on the back or hold hands with a woman. What he's saying, that's a euphemism for immorality. It's good not to give yourself to immorality. And then in verse 6, he says that this is good. Marriage is kind of good, but it's a concession in a sense. So he's saying that singleness, celibacy is good. However, what is not good is married people trying to live as if they're single, as if they're not married. And that's what apparently that's what some of the Corinthians were doing. They were not having marital relations with one another, even though they were married, because they were trying to act as if they were single so they could, I guess, in their minds, be holier and do more for God. But Paul is the realist. He acknowledges marriage is good, and it's better to get married than just burn with passion. And so Paul's point then in marriage is quite radical for that day in that context when he says that the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. That's not too controversial for an ancient society. But then he says, likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. So Paul points out that husbands and wives have authority over each other and are to use that for the good of one another. So, how does this shape us, right? Paul's teaching on marriage and singleness and all of this, it can seem esoteric maybe at times, and we probably don't struggle with married people trying to be single or acting like they're single to do more for God these days. But what does this mean? Well, I think for married couples, these verses teach us to cultivate a relationship of mutual care, generosity, and trust in every area. Obviously, that includes physical intimacy, but every area of marriage. And for singles, it shows us the value of self-control, respect for others, and sacrificial love. Paul's teaching shows that there's a beauty in honoring marriage, there is a beauty in having mutual care for one another, and there is a beauty in singleness and encouraging purity in all seasons of life. And really, his main point in this whole chapter is no matter your station in life, what we are called to is the same, no matter what. We are to live in a way that points to the selfless and sacrificial love of Jesus.